I came up the porch steps with a small bag of gifts in my hand, telling myself the house would feel warmer once I stepped inside. The second the door opened, I knew I was wrong. There was a breath in the hallway that wasn't mine, soft and quick like someone had just moved out of sight. Then I saw it on the floor. Mother's amber ornament crushed into a fan of sharp glass, the ribbon still tied neat, as if someone had ripped it from the tree and ground it under their heel. I stood there cold, settling into my bones in a way the winter wind never could. I didn't call out. I didn't turn back. I only made one quiet promise as the porch light flickered behind me. I will not let the truth hide in this house again. The wind came up the driveway with me pushing at the truck door as I climbed out, carrying the kind of cold that made joints ache and old memories feel too close. I stood for a moment by the hood, watching my breath turn to vapor in the porch light, and thought about the fact that this was the first Christmas Eve in 10 years I was spending without my son. He was with his mother across town, a different tree, a different house, a different version of family. My phone stayed dark in my pocket. No new messages, no missed calls. The front steps creaked the way they always had boards bowed from years of salt and winter boots. Mother used to complain about that sound, then laugh and say at least she could hear when her boys came home. The wreath on the door still hung there, but the bough sagged and half the fake berries had fallen off. It looked tired. So did I. Inside the house, held on to the last of the furnace heat, but the air felt hollow, like it had not been breathed in for a long time. A trace of cinnamon and something like old coffee sat in the air, ghosts of habits Mother never quite let go. I closed the door behind me, set my keys in the same glass dish she had used since I was a kid, and walked into the living room. The high shelf above the television waited in the dim light. I did not turn on the overhead lamp, just reached up with the familiarity of someone who had done this movement since his arms first got long enough. My hand found the small wooden box. It used to feel solid in my grip. Now it felt lighter. The lid sat crooked. My thumb ran along the latch and caught on a fresh, rough edge. Someone had forced it open. I lifted the lid. The square of folded cloth lay there, a faint indentation pressed into the center where the ornament should have been. The space was empty. My chest tightened in a way that had nothing to do with the cold. That last ornament was the one thing Mother had insisted on keeping out of the hands of grandchildren and clumsy holiday visitors. When I was a boy, I thought it was just because it was fragile. When I grew older, I understood it mattered to her in some way she never fully explained. Now it was gone, and the wood under my fingers felt strangely exposed. Warren's voice reached me from the kitchen, low and controlled. He was in his late 40s now, but when he spoke like that, he sounded like the version of himself who always had a plan, even when the plan was falling apart. He said something about not pushing it too far, and about needing a little more time. Then a pause, a long breath into the phone, and the rustle of him turning away when he noticed me in the doorway. "You made good time," he said, eyes flicking up and then back to the counter as he hung up. "Road's clear. Clear enough," I answered, my voice sounding older than it did in my head. He nodded once the way men do when there is more to say, but neither is ready to say it. He started rinsing a mug that was already clean. Lydia stood near the dining table. She was arranging napkins that did not need arranging, smoothing a wrinkle that was not there. She looked up, offered a small smile that did not reach her eyes, then focused on the table again. The red candle at the center had burned down in uneven lines, wax spilled over the side and hardened in a thin river. It was the same brand Mother had used in her last year, the same deep color she dripped onto envelopes and pressed her old ring into when she sealed letters she did not want us to open. "Have you been upstairs?" I asked her. "To Mom's room," she shook her head quickly. "No, I stayed down here. Wanted to make sure the heat stayed on." Her voice was light, but her fingers worried the edge of a napkin until the paper almost tore. Her eyes kept sliding toward the hallway where the stairs were. In the living room, the old recliner by the window waited the one Mother claimed the day my father died and never gave up. I lowered myself into it. The cushion sagged and released the faint smell of her lavender detergent, and beneath that the dry scent of paper and dust. My hand found the worn patch on the armrest, where her thumb used to trace idle patterns while she watched the news. I sat there feeling every breath in my chest longer and heavier than the last. On the mantel, the framed family photo leaned at an angle. I reached over and straightened it. In the picture, Mother stood in the center, her hand resting on my shoulder, that little half-smile on her face, like she knew something the rest of us did not. Warren stood on the other side, his arm crossed over his chest. Lydia tucked in at the end, younger half hidden. The glass felt cold under my fingertips. Her voice came back to me from that last night in the hospital. She had taken my hand, her fingers smaller and lighter than I ever remembered them being, and said, "If that last ornament ever disappears, the truth is closer than you think." At the time, I took it as the kind of strange thing people say when they are floating between pain and medicine and memory. Sitting in that chair now with the empty box behind me, the words settled differently. The hallway light near the basement flickered on, then off, then on again. It was the kind of stutter that feels too deliberate for bad wiring and too soft for a storm. I listened. The furnace hummed. Somewhere in the back of the house, a pipe clicked as it cooled. No voices. No footsteps. Just the layered quiet of a place that had seen too much and refused to talk about it. Warren passed through the living room, checked the deadbolt on the front door, then the chain. His boots tracked small, wet marks across the tired rug. He glanced toward the hallway, then away. "We should eat before it gets cold," he said. Lydia nodded without looking at either of us. I stayed where I was. My phone buzzed once in my pocket. A photo came through from my ex-wife of our son, in front of another tree, another set of lights, another version of Christmas. Under it, 2 words. "He is good." I stared at the screen longer than I needed to, then slipped the phone away. A small sound rose from below the floor, a dull, soft shift, like something settling on a shelf that had not held weight in a long time. It could have been the house. Old wood, old pipes, old memories. It could have been nothing. Still, the muscles at the back of my neck tightened. I turned my head toward the basement door. The light above it steadied, throwing a pale band across the top step that I could just see from where I sat. The door itself stayed closed. No movement, no shadow under the frame. For a while, none of us spoke. Lydia folded her hands together and stared at the candle. Warren rubbed his jaw the way he did when numbers did not add up. I sat in Mother's chair, one palm flat against the worn fabric, feeling the faint warmth the furnace managed to push into the room. Some nights, a house feels like it is holding its breath. Christmas Eve seemed to be one of those nights. I watched the line of light above the basement door, and the silence between the 3 of us, and the empty space in the wooden box on the shelf, and I stayed there listening, waiting for something I could not yet name to step out of the dark. The house was quiet when I opened my eyes. The kind of quiet that follows a night spent turning thoughts over until they lose their edges. Light from the thin winter sun slipped through the blinds and settled across the living room floor. For a moment, I stayed still in Mother's recliner and let the silence press against me. I could almost hear her in the kitchen again, humming softly, as she waited for the first pot of coffee to finish dripping. The memory lasted only a breath before the present took its place. Warren's voice carried down the hallway before I saw him. His steps were heavy. His tone clipped the way a man speaks when he has run out of patience with himself, not with others. "You had the key last, didn't you?" To her room, I pushed myself up, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. The cold in the house was sharper in the morning, settling low to the floor like it had been waiting for us. Warren stood at the end of the hallway, jaw tight, arms crossed, trying to look composed, but not hiding the truth well enough. "I haven't touched her room," I said quietly. "You know I haven't." He looked away first. Behind him, Lydia hovered near the counter with a mug between both hands. She held it so tightly the ceramic might have cracked if she squeezed any harder. Her hair was still messy from sleep and she hadn't bothered with makeup, something she only did when her nerves were close to the surface. She said gently, "There are things Mother didn't think we were ready for. She must have had her reasons." Her voice trembled on the last word, and she lowered the mug onto the counter. The faint clink of porcelain against stone felt too loud in the still kitchen. I moved toward the trash can to toss a crumpled napkin and noticed a corner of crisp paper sticking out. Something about the weight of it pulled at me. I eased it free and unfolded it slowly. The layout was familiar long before I made sense of the words. A property transfer document. The house. Mother's name printed cleanly, her signature curling at the bottom. But the ink was wrong, darker than signatures she made in her final months. Too smooth, too practiced. Fresh. Warren crossed the room in 3 long steps and snatched the paper from me. His voice rose, not loud, but strained. "It's not what you think, just leave it." His hand shook slightly as he folded the document and shoved it into his jacket pocket. The fear behind his irritation was clearer now. A man with a son depending on him tends to hide his vulnerabilities in plain sight, but they reveal themselves anyway. Lydia took a slow breath. Eyes on the document now hidden in Warren's pocket. "Last Thanksgiving she tried to tell you something," she said softly. "She said you had touched money you shouldn't have. You left before she finished." Warren rubbed the back of his neck, a gesture I'd seen too many times growing up. When his nerves got the best of him, he cleaned. When fear got the best of him, he ran. When shame got the best of him, he said nothing at all. This morning he said nothing. Breakfast was quiet. Too quiet. The sort of quiet that made every sound feel magnified. Lydia sliced toast into thin pieces, but barely ate. Warren tapped his fork against the plate in a restless rhythm. Even the ticking of the wall clock felt more deliberate than usual, like it was counting down to something we couldn't yet see. I thought of my son, then, somewhere across town, eating his own breakfast at a table I no longer sat at. I wondered if he missed me this morning, or if he had grown used to the rhythm of holidays spent in separate houses. I wondered if he remembered the way Mother used to hand him candy canes before breakfast, because she claimed rules didn't apply on Christmas. I checked my phone under the table. Nothing new. When I stood to throw away a napkin, my shoe brushed against something near the doorframe. A small metallic sound light, but sharp. I bent down and found a brass key lying half hidden in the shadow of the entryway. Smooth edges, heavy in the palm. I tried it on the front door. No fit. The back door. Nothing. The garage. No luck. Every lock in the house resisted it. Lydia asked quietly, "What is that a key that doesn't belong here?" I answered. Warren's face paled, the kind of pale a man gets when the timelines in his head no longer match what he wants to believe. "Who else has been in this house?" he said under his breath. The room seemed to hold the question, letting it echo long after his voice fell silent. I set the key on the counter. The morning light glinted off it like it knew more than we did. I stared at it a moment longer, trying to trace where it came from. Mother never handed out spare keys. She trusted locks more than people. A soft sound drifted from upstairs. Not the sharp kind of noise that makes you jump. More like weight shifting on old floorboards. A reminder that the house had its own memory and its own stories. Lydia whispered that she heard it too. Warren straightened muscles tight, ready to risk opening a door none of us had touched since the funeral. I told him to wait. My voice came out lower than I expected, quiet but certain. "We don't know what it is." He looked at me like he wanted to argue, but something in my face must have stopped him. He sat back down, hands clenched. The three of us stayed there for a long moment, listening to the stillness. The house felt alive and unsettled, like the walls were waiting for us to acknowledge something they already knew. I rinsed the dishes slowly, my mind replaying Mother's last Christmas morning, her voice light as she opened her favorite ornament box. She had held that amber piece like it was something sacred. And now it was gone. The brass key on the counter seemed to pulse in the light, a presence of its own. Something had shifted in the house. Not last night, long before that. And as I wiped my hands on a towel, I felt the certainty settle in my chest. The missing ornament wasn't an accident. Someone in this family was holding back a truth none of us were ready to face. I looked toward the staircase again. The light above it flickered once, faint and deliberate. Then it went still. The house stayed quiet, long after Warren and Lydia slipped away to their rooms. I remained in the kitchen, hands still damp from the dishes, listening to the soft ticking of the wall clock as it echoed through the dim space. The brass key on the counter caught a thin line of light from the window, a stubborn reminder that something or someone had crossed a threshold we didn't see. The warmth from the furnace faded too quickly, leaving the air colder than it should have been. It made me think of those nights after my divorce, when I would sit alone in my apartment waiting for my son to call. The kind of waiting that wears through a man's ribs. I walked toward the old drawer by the stove. Its handle stuck the way it always had metal scraping against wood. When I pulled it open, the familiar scent of pencil dust and aging paper rose like a ghost. Inside were remnants of Mother's working life. Rubber bands, stamps, a few envelopes she never mailed. Beneath them was her small notebook, the one she wrote in through so many late nights. I stood still for a moment, letting the weight of it sit in my hands. The cover felt dry and warm from the oven's heat, as if her palms had left something behind. The first pages were filled with her neat handwriting, straight lines, and tidy margins. She always believed handwriting revealed character, and she kept hers controlled even when life wasn't. But as I reached the last page, something shifted. The ink pressed deeper strokes, uneven. She must have written it in a moment when her hand was shaking, when she could no longer pretend her thoughts were steady. If Elliot is reading this, it means you've stepped into the darkness I feared. The words didn't shock me. They settled. Heavy, slow, and familiar. They felt like the final thread in a conversation she had tried to start but never had the courage to finish. A faint smudge of water had dried along the bottom edge of the page, blurring the ink. It could have been tea. It could have been a tear. I closed the notebook gently, almost afraid the page would tear if I breathed too hard. My eyes drifted to the kitchen window. Snowflakes pressed lightly against the glass, soft and soundless the way they did the night Mother spent her last Christmas Eve at home. I remembered sitting beside her chair, Her fingers curled around mine, the amber ornament resting on the table beside her. She tried to tell me something then. She took a breath, squeezed my hand, and said, "I have to tell you what I should have told you years ago." Her voice carried a tremble I had never heard in her before. But then she blinked, swallowed her words, and stared at the lights on the tree as if they were safer to speak to than her own son. I held her hand until she fell asleep, not knowing that would be the last night she spent in this house. A soft metallic click pulled me back to the present. I turned to the kitchen clock. The hands had stopped at 2:11 a.m. I stepped closer, staring at the frozen minute hand. It lay slightly tilted, as if someone had touched it, nudged it, then left it there. My breath fogged the glass. I wiped it with my thumb, and noticed a faint smear like the mark of another thumbprint. Lydia had been too afraid to clean the clock after Mother passed. Warren never bothered with it, which meant someone else had been near it. Somehow that simple thought chilled me more than the winter outside. I moved through the kitchen, slowly scanning the shelves. The coffee tin sat angled forward instead of flush against the wall. The sugar jar was shifted left. The chipped blue mug, Mother's favorite, had its handle turned inward. She never placed it that way, not once in the decades I lived under her roof. The changes were small, deliberate, almost respectful. Someone had searched here. Someone who knew not to leave a mess. Behind me, footsteps approached with the light hesitation of someone afraid of what they might walk into. Lydia appeared in the doorway, arms wrapped around herself. The color had left her cheeks. Her voice carried a fragile quiet. "You found something, didn't you?" I handed her the notebook. She didn't open it. She traced her fingers along the worn spine, her breath catching when she recognized it. "Mother trusted you the most, Elliot. She always said you were the one who could handle the truth." I shook my head. Trust isn't always a blessing, especially when it comes with a burden you didn't choose. Her eyes softened, but there was fear behind them. The same fear she carried after Dad died, when Mother shouldered both grief and responsibility, and Lydia clung to her like a lifeline. She closed the notebook and pressed it to her chest. "Warren knows something," she whispered. "I can feel it." I didn't answer. I didn't have to. The tension between them had been building for years, showing itself in the quiet moments more than the loud ones. A faint sound traveled through the room, a low thump from the living room, followed by the creaking of old boards. Warren was pacing again. When he was nervous, he moved. When he was hiding something, he moved faster. I walked to the mantel where the family photo rested slightly crooked. I straightened it. My reflection in the glass looked older than I remembered. Tired. Determined. Hungry for answers I wasn't sure I wanted. The refrigerator hummed, then clicked off. The sudden silence pressed against my ears. I felt the shift before I heard the sound. A soft groan rolled through the hallway, followed by the long, familiar creak of the basement door easing open. Lydia froze. Her fingers tightened around the notebook. "Elliot, be careful." I stepped into the hallway. The light above the door buzzed, flickered once, then held steady. The door itself was cracked open just wide enough for a thin blade of darkness to slip out. A breath of cold air drifted up the staircase, carrying a faint scent of lavender, the same perfume Mother used in her final years. I rested my hand on the doorknob. The metal was cold enough to sting. The house stood still behind me, as if holding its breath. Whatever waited down there wasn't just part of the mystery. It was part of her. I pushed the door open, letting the darkness breathe into the light. The basement greeted me with a breath of cold air as soon as I stepped through the doorway, a slow exhale rising from the dark below. The light switch felt stiff under my thumb. When the bulb flickered to life, its thin yellow glow stretched across the basement like it had to fight its way through the shadows. The smell reached me next, a mix of old paper and damp wood, familiar enough to pull up memories of Mother working late nights down here, with her reading glasses slipping down her nose. She always said the basement was quiet enough for her thoughts to line up in order. Tonight, it felt like they had all scattered. I moved down the steps, my hand gliding along the railing. The wood was colder than it should have been, as if someone else had touched it recently and taken the warmth with them. Halfway down, something caught my eye on the cement floor. The dust shifted in patterns I didn't recognize. When my foot hit the bottom step, I saw them clearly. 2 sets of footprints, one larger the stride, sure, the other smaller, the toe prints lighter. A man and a woman. Neither set belonged to me, Warren or Lydia. The fresh edges told me they had been here after the dust settled, not days ago, but hours at most. I crouched beside them, letting my fingers hover above the shapes. They looked deliberate, purposeful. Whoever came down here wasn't exploring, they were searching. The shelves along the wall stood exactly where they always had, but the boxes Mother labeled with her neat handwriting had been shifted slightly. A few sat open lids pushed back like someone wanted to make the disturbance look accidental. Only the boxes related to the charity fund investigation were touched. The rest of her belongings were untouched, still bathed in dust. I reached for one of the papers inside a ledger printout and brushed away the dirt. The ink lines were crisp, listing transactions that didn't make sense even before I understood what they meant to her. Behind me, a soft thud sounded from upstairs. Someone was moving, likely Warren. He paced when he felt cornered. He slammed drawers when he felt ashamed. I listened for Lydia, but she was quiet, maybe sitting in Mother's old chair trying to steady herself. The faint noise grounded me in the present. The basement felt even colder now. On the workbench, something glinted under the weak light. I walked toward it slowly. A shard of amber-colored glass lay on the wooden surface. Its edges were sharp, broken clean through the center. I lifted it carefully, turning it between my fingers. The color was unmistakable. It belonged to the missing ornament, the one Mother told me never to lose, the one she guarded so closely I once wondered if she feared someone would break into the house for it. Seeing it cracked open here made the back of my neck tighten. Next to the shard lay an old cassette player. The plastic casing was warped. When I pressed the play button, the machine whirred, then sputtered with a dry static that scraped against the silence. There was no voice left on it. Someone had erased whatever Mother recorded. Not by accident. The tape had been exposed to something strong enough to wipe it clean. I felt a sting in my chest at the thought of her voice being removed so deliberately. I moved toward the shelves again, scanning for something the intruders might have left behind. That was when I noticed it on the railing at the bottom of the stairs. A clear handprint sweeping across the dust. The outline of a woman's hand smaller than Lydia's, unmistakably fresh. I placed my hand a few inches from it without touching the dust. The wood felt cold where her palm had rested. The shape seemed to glow faintly under the dim light, a mark of someone who did not belong in this house, someone who came here quietly, but without fear. A faint hum carried through the walls as the furnace kicked on upstairs, warming the floor above, but doing little for the basement. I found myself remembering the nights Mother told us not to play down here. She always said it was because of the old wiring or the clutter, but I wondered now if she had been hiding something long before any of us were old enough to notice. I pressed my thumb against the bridge of my nose, trying to steady the ache forming there. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I checked it, half expecting a message from my son, but the screen was empty. The silence from him felt heavier today, like distance had its own weight. I let the phone slip back into my pocket. I gathered a few scattered documents, and set them neatly inside a box, restoring some order. Mother would have wanted that. She believed chaos made people careless, and careless people missed the truth. As I aligned the papers, a shadow crossed the top of the stairs. I looked up, but whoever was there moved away too quickly. It could have been Warren. It could have been Lydia. Or it could have been a trick of the light through the half-open doorway. I took one last look around the room. The footprints, the broken amber glass, the empty tape. The handprint, every detail pointed to someone searching for the ornament. Not the ornament itself, but something inside it. Something worth breaking in for. Something worth erasing a voice for. When I climbed the stairs, the railing felt slightly warmer, as if someone had touched it minutes before I arrived. The air in the hallway was different too, carrying a faint trace of something that reminded me of Mother's perfume, though I knew it might have been nothing more than memory rising at the wrong time. I pushed the basement door gently until it settled against the frame, but didn't close completely. The small gap felt necessary, as if sealing it would trap something important on the wrong side. I stood there a moment longer, letting the house breathe around me. The kitchen light flickered once, just enough to cast a brief shadow across the floor. I knew then that the ornament hadn't been stolen for sentiment. Someone wanted what Mother hid inside it, and they had come far closer to finding it than any of us understood. The truth was moving toward us, quiet but certain like footsteps in the dust that didn't belong to us. The house had settled into the kind of silence that makes every breath feel heavier. I could still smell the basement on my sleeves, a faint mix of dust and cold concrete that clung to me long after I shut the door behind me. The storm outside had thickened, throwing snow against the windows in soft pulses, each one dimming the glow of the Christmas lights strung along the porch. I sat alone in the living room, the shard of amber pressing through my pocket like a reminder I wasn't ready to look at directly. My phone buzzed once, short and sharp in the quiet. Warren's name lit the screen. Midnight calls from my brother never carried good news. I answered before it could ring again. His voice trembled at the edges. They sent me pictures, Elliot. Pictures of my boy leaving school. My spine tightened. Who did I heard him swallow hard? I don't know. The message said, "Don't let a Granger reopen the past." The air in the room shifted. The furnace shut off, leaving the house without its low, steady hum. For a moment I could hear the snow piling against the siding. Then the call cut sharply, replaced by a stranger's voice, slipping in between the static. He spoke my mother's maiden name slowly, as if testing it on his tongue. Then the line went dead. I stared at the phone, waiting for it to buzz again. Instead, the lamp beside the couch flickered twice. A soft knock echoed inside the wall, too controlled to be a settling beam. My phone lit up with a new message. No caller ID. Find the truth before they do. I stood feeling my heartbeat rise into my throat. Upstairs, a floorboard shifted under Lydia's careful step. She was probably checking on her own son, unaware of the storm that had already moved inside this house. I called Warren back. He answered on the second ring, breathing fast. "Tell me exactly what's going on." He hesitated before speaking, as if deciding how much of himself he was willing to expose. "Someone sent me old bank documents. Copies of files Mother kept from that charity mess years ago. Why not take them to the police? Because they'd dig through my financial history before they bothered to protect my kid." There was a pain in his voice that didn't need explanation. Warren had made mistakes, but they came from trying to carry more than he could afford to handle. I pressed a hand to my forehead, feeling the weight of his words settle in. "What did you do?" "Warren." His breath caught. "You know how numbers are, Elliot. They don't lie. But people do. And now someone thinks I owe them something. I didn't ask who. I didn't need to. The world he moved in had shadows of its own, and most of them weren't the kind that showed up on paper. Outside, the wind slammed against the house, rattling the windows in their frames. Snow swirled under the porch light, turning everything into a blur of white and gray. The Christmas decorations flickered under the strain, almost as if they recognized they were no longer welcome in the quiet. You should bring the documents here. I can't. They warned me not to move them. They warned me not to talk to you. So why call? He went silent. I could hear him breathing, hear the hesitation, hear the part of him still trying to be a father first, and a brother second. Because I trust you more than I trust myself right now. I looked toward the hallway, watching the shadows shift. Upstairs, something moved again. Not in Lydia's room this time. Higher. On the roof. The kind of sound snow doesn't make. A slow compression, as if weight had been added where nothing should be. Warren must have heard my quiet. Elliot, what is it? Nothing you can fix tonight, I said softly. Keep your doors locked. Keep your boy close. I ended the call before he could ask more. My hand lowered to my side, but the phone felt heavier, pulling at my arm, like it carried every fear we never said out loud. The furnace clicked back on, blowing warm air through the vents, but it felt thin against the cold creeping in from the corners of the house. I walked to the window and looked out. Through the blur of snow, I thought I saw movement near the trees. A figure, or a shadow, or maybe just my own mind trying to fill in a shape it didn't want to name. In my pocket, the shard of amber shifted with my steps. I pressed my fingers against it, feeling the break in its center, a line that reminded me of something split, long before any of us realized it. Another creak sounded from above. Not loud, not rushed, just deliberate, as if whoever or whatever was out there wasn't afraid of being heard. I stayed still, listening to the roof settle under the weight. The Christmas lights behind me flickered one more time, casting a brief, warm glow across the living room floor. It was the kind of glow that made you almost believe the night was ordinary. Almost. The storm had settled into a low, steady push against the house by the time I left the living room. The lights along the porch flickered again, not enough to go dark, just enough to remind me the power grid was groaning under the weight of the cold. I could still feel the echo of that last creak on the roof from earlier, the one that didn't sound like settling snow. It stayed with me like a hand on the back of my neck. Lydia was sitting beside the old family photo. When I returned, her shoulders pulled in, as if she were trying to fold herself into the dim lamplight. She didn't look up at me. Her eyes were fixed on Mother's face in the picture, searching for something I wasn't sure she had ever found in life. I walked closer, and only then did she lift a small piece of paper from her lap. She handed it to me without a word. The scrap was marked with 3 interlocking circles pressed so firmly into the paper the lines were slightly raised. It was a symbol I hadn't seen in years, not since Mother would come home from the bank with that tense look she tried to hide behind a tired smile. That mark meant something serious, something that stayed off official records. I asked where she got it. She let her breath out slowly, as if releasing the answer cost her more than the question. I opened the ornament once, she said. It was at the hospital. Mother was asleep, or maybe not really asleep. She squeezed my hand when I touched it, and I thought she wanted me to look. Her fingers trembled slightly as she went on. There was something inside it, a little slot. It flashed green just once. Then it died. I didn't tell anyone. I couldn't tell Warren, and I wasn't sure how to tell you. Her voice caught on the last word. There was something else in that pause, something she kept to herself, a memory that wasn't ready to be spoken aloud. I waited, but she stopped there. I unfolded the slip and held it under the lamp. The grooves in the paper told their own story. These lines weren't written with clarity. They were carved by a shaking hand. Something had terrified Mother deeply enough to leave its mark right in the fibers. A kitchen timer blinked on the counter, 12, 12, 12. It had been reset during the electrical dip earlier, but seeing it frozen like that still pulled something uneasy through my chest. The tiles under my feet felt colder than they should have. The house was holding its breath again. Lydia stepped closer. "You remember her last night, don't you?" I nodded without looking up. She tried to speak, but couldn't. I held her hand. She looked at me like the words were stuck behind her eyes. "She said something to me too," Lydia whispered. A quiet line I didn't understand. She said, "You will know what to do when he can't." I turned to her. "Who is he?" She shook her head. "I don't know, and I was too afraid to ask." The words settled between us with a weight I didn't expect. Lydia had always been the softer one, the one who felt more than she could handle. But this wasn't softness. This was something she had carried alone. She walked with me back into the living room. The furnace kicked on with a low rumble, and warm air drifted across the floor, but it felt thin. The kind of warmth that didn't reach the corners of the house. I took the warped cassette from my coat and placed it beneath the lamp. The surface was distorted, the tape pulled or magnetized enough to blur whatever sound had once lived there. Lydia leaned in without touching it, as if the thing itself might bite. She lifted her phone and let a recording play. Hiss a faint scrape, then a slow inhale followed by a measured exhale. It matched the breath that cut into Warren's call. Too calm. Too intentional. She whispered Victor Hale was at the hospital that night. The name felt heavier when spoken out loud. Mother had defended him years ago, said he deserved a chance after being blamed for something he didn't do. She trusted him. But trust has a way of curving in on itself over time. Lydia folded her arms across her chest as if bracing herself. "I saw him once, you know. Before Mother died. In the parking garage. He didn't see me. But he stood there a long time looking up at the window of her room, like he wanted to go in but wasn't allowed. She hadn't told me this before. Not once. Why didn't you say something?" "Because I didn't want it to be him," she said softly. "Mother believed in him, and I wanted to believe her." I sat down slowly, feeling the edge of the couch sink under my weight. The shard of amber inside my pocket pressed against my thigh, a reminder of something broken long before we found the pieces. Lydia sat beside me, not touching, but close enough that I could feel the tension running through her like static. "If the truth changes everything between us," she whispered, "can you still open it?" The question hung in the air, heavier than the storm outside. I looked at her, at the fear tucked behind her eyes, at the hope she didn't want to admit to. And for a moment, I wasn't sure if she was asking about the ornament or about something deeper, something she feared would crack our family open like that shard of amber. I didn't answer. The house answered for me. A soft thud above us. A shift of weight. Not snow. Not wind. Something moving where no one was supposed to be. The furnace hummed louder, as if trying to drown it out. The slip with the interlocking circles warmed in my hand, though I wasn't sure if it was the lamp or the fear rising in me. The truth wasn't coming. It had already stepped onto our roof. The storm had quieted by the time I reached the front window, leaving only a slow, heavy snowfall that softened the edges of the streetlights outside. The house felt too still, too aware of itself, as if it had learned to listen to every movement we made inside it. I rested my hand on the cold glass and watched the snow drift across the driveway, buying myself one steady breath before returning to the questions waiting behind me. The search result for the license plate glowed on my phone like a verdict I already feared. Victor Hale, the man Mother once defended. The man who vanished from the bank after the charity fund scandal carved a hole through half her department. Seeing his name so bluntly confirmed on the screen made my throat tighten in a way I didn't expect. He hadn't been a ghost, just a shadow waiting for the right moment to step back into our lives. Behind me, Lydia stood in the doorway holding her elbows, as if trying to keep her warmth close. "You think it was really him at the hospital?" she asked. I showed her the screen. He was there the night she died. At the exact time the cameras froze. Her eyes dipped to the floor, and I saw guilt move across her face, light but unmistakable. Mother mentioned him once, she whispered. Weeks before she fell ill. She said people who lose their way can still find the truth if someone keeps the door open. I thought she meant Warren. Her voice cracked softly at the end, and I let the silence between us hold for a moment. It had weight now, not awkwardness. The kind of weight that comes from understanding too late that someone you love was fighting battles you never saw. I walked into the dining room where the neighbor's note lay folded near the edge of the table. Earlier, he'd spoken with the casual certainty of a man who watches everything. He described a woman with long brown hair standing in front of Mother's house during the week she passed. She wasn't crying or calling. She was staring at the windows as if waiting for one of them to move. When he mentioned the intensity in her posture, I had dismissed it as imagination. Now it felt like a missing piece, sliding into place. I lifted the slip of paper. The woman he saw was Evelyn Hale, Victor's sister. Lydia's breath caught. She handled Mother's discharge papers. And she was outside this house before that, I said. Something shifted inside her. Not panic, but a dawning understanding that reached further back than this week, all the way to the months when Mother started acting quieter than usual, locking drawers she used to leave open, watching the mailbox too closely. I sat down at the table. The amber shard in my pocket pressed into my thigh again when I leaned forward. I pulled it out and set it beneath the light. The fractured edge glowed faintly, catching the warm lamp in jagged streaks. Whoever had tried to open the ornament hadn't been gentle. They didn't understand how it worked, or what it contained. Lydia lowered herself across from me and kept her gaze on the shard. "Do you think they meant to hurt her?" "No," I said quietly. "They were after something she kept from them, something they believed belonged to them." She looked down at her hands. "And Mother gave it to you instead." I didn't answer. The furnace kicked on in the background, blowing warm air that never seemed to settle. The house held too many memories for heat to do much good. A loose spoon rattled softly inside a drawer, shifting with the vibration. The sound made both of us look toward the kitchen for a second longer than necessary. I leaned back in the chair. Mother didn't hide money. She hid evidence. And not just evidence, Lydia. She hid people. Protected them, maybe. From the system. From themselves. From whatever was pulling strings under that bank. Lydia looked at me with something like fear mixed with a strange respect. "Do you think Victor was one of them?" "He might have been," I said. "But that doesn't mean he's the same man now." She nodded, but her eyes drifted toward the hallway where the family photo still sat. Mother always saw people the way they could be, not the way they were. It scared me sometimes. Her voice softened to almost nothing. And sometimes it saved us. Her words lingered in the air, pulling a quiet ache through my chest. It reminded me of Warren's son, the boy still too young to understand any of this. I pictured him walking out of school with his backpack bouncing against his shoulders, innocent to the fact that someone somewhere had taken his photograph. Fear settled into my stomach like a stone. I turned back to the shard, the edges catching new lines of light, as if shifting with each thought. Victor and Evelyn weren't enemies, I said. They were searching for something Mother kept away from them. And they were close. Close enough to try forcing the ornament open. Close enough to be on this property before she died. Lydia wrapped her arms around herself again, her voice trembling. If they were so close, why didn't they just ask her? Maybe they did, I said. Maybe she didn't trust their reasons. The wind pressed harder against the porch, making the Christmas lights strain with a faint buzz. The house listened again. It had learned to expect strange noises. Lydia reached across the table, not touching my hand, but hovering near it. Whatever is inside that ornament, Mother wanted you to find it, not them. What if the truth changes everything between us? I let the question settle. The weight of it was heavier than the shard in my hand. Then it needs to be opened even more. We both fell silent, listening to the storm rebuild its momentum outside. A passing car brushed light across the window, then faded until only our reflections remained in the dark glass. The shard glowed once under the lamp, a brief flare, as though catching something invisible. I watched it a long time. The ornament wasn't just a clue. It was the center of the storm that had been circling us long before Christmas Eve. That morning carried the kind of cold that seemed to settle inside the bones. Before it ever touched the skin, when I stepped out onto the porch, the whole yard lay beneath a clean sheet of snow, quiet enough to make every breath feel heavier than it should. I closed the door slowly behind me, leaving Lydia's worried eyes and the remnants of last night's tension lingering somewhere in the house. As I walked toward the truck, I sensed something shifting beneath the surface of our family, like ice beginning to crack under weight it could no longer hold. When the engine finally turned over, I caught a glimpse of the silver sedan through the rearview mirror, parked at the same angle as last night. Windows fogged. The kind of presence that pretended to be ordinary while doing a poor job of hiding intention. I had seen it before near the church parking lot a few weeks back, and I had pushed it out of my mind. Now it lingered like a shadow, choosing its moment. I pulled away from the house without looking too long. The ride into town was quiet but familiar. Snow clung to the rooftops of the old two-story homes, and smoke drifted from a few chimneys in thin, determined lines. When I turned onto Broad Street, something inside tightened. I had walked this same stretch as a boy waiting for Mother to finish her late shifts, swinging my legs off the cold bench, listening for the click of her heels and the soft sound of the bank door closing behind her. Inside the bank felt warmer than the world outside, but no less heavy. Paper coffee and a faint trace of lemon polish gathered in the air. An older clerk looked up from her desk, her expression softening into recognition. "You're Elaine's son." I nodded. "Elliot." She stepped around the counter with the kind of care that comes from years of doing things properly. "Your mother," she said quietly, never once cut corners, not even when it cost her. It struck deeper than I expected. I followed her down the hallway to the safe deposit room, listening to the soft jangle of keys as if it were an echo from some older memory. The metal box slid out with a muted scrape, smaller than I imagined, lighter, and somehow heavier than everything else I carried. Inside were only a few items, but the silence around them felt like a barrier I wasn't sure I had permission to cross. The will came first, neatly folded, protected in a clear sleeve. Her handwriting on the front was steady, The same lettering she'd used on every birthday card she ever left in my jacket pocket. When I read the line naming me as the one who would keep the house, something tightened beneath my ribs. Elliot protects what matters from greed. I sank into the thin plastic chair, letting the words sit with me. It didn't feel like praise. It felt like responsibility, and the kind that doesn't loosen its grip once it's placed into your hands. Next came the USB drive. Black, ordinary, the size of a thumb. I slipped it into my pocket, planning to check it later. The final item was a sealed envelope, the wax pressed with her ring, the imprint deep and certain. I held it for a long time. Paper shouldn't feel that heavy. When I broke the seal, the letter opened like a breath she never got to finish. Her handwriting was tight. The strokes rushed and uneven. Do not let the mistakes of adults destroy an innocent child. Ben came to mind first. His oversized winter coat, the way he dragged one foot slightly when he walked. But then another image surfaced. Lydia, at 16, sitting with Mother at the kitchen table, while Mother taught her how to balance a checkbook and a life at the same time. Children weren't always small. I read the letter again, searching for something between the lines, but she wrote only what mattered, enough to guide, not enough to accuse. A strand of long brown hair slipped from the fold. A scrap of gray fabric marked with the faint trace of lipstick followed it. I knew immediately who they belonged to. Evelyn had been here. She had touched what wasn't meant for her hands. When I returned the keys, the clerk's face creased with worry. Your mother checked that box often, she said, more often than most, and she always asked whether anyone else had come near it. Her voice lowered as if the walls might listen. Security tapes get overwritten sometimes, especially when managers decide not to ask questions. I thanked her and stepped outside. The cold bit at my cheeks sharper than before. In the car, the USB blinked once before the laptop showed me nothing but an empty directory. The files had been deleted months ago. Around the same time, Warren began avoiding my calls and raising his voice without meaning to. The fact settled into place too easily. Driving back, the sky had dimmed into a washed-out gray. Streetlights flickered on halos forming in the falling snow. Halfway down Maple Road, the silver sedan appeared again in the mirror. Same distance. Same quiet persistence. I slowed slightly. It slowed too. I changed lanes. It followed. Not aggressive. Just present. When I turned onto our street, it held back as if satisfied with the answer it came for, and disappeared behind the line of trees. The house waited in stillness. Warm light spilled from the living room windows, and for a moment it almost looked like any other home preparing for Christmas. Until I saw the footprints on the front steps. 2 sets. Fresh. Too large to be Lydia's. Too narrow to be Warren's. Snow hadn't had time to soften the edges yet. I stepped out, keeping the letter tight in my hand. The wind lifted one corner of it, making the paper flutter like something breathing. Inside that house were secrets waiting for the moment they would stop being polite. Mother had given me her warning. Not to fear the truth, but to hold it carefully. And now, standing on the snow-covered steps, I could feel the weight of what she trusted me to do settle fully into place. The porch light hummed overhead as I moved toward the door, its glow pulling me back into the center of everything she left behind. Warren sat across from me, his shoulders rising and falling like a man who had been holding his breath for years. When I placed the will on the table, he reached for it, then stopped halfway, as if the truth itself carried heat. He lowered himself into the chair without looking at me, and for a moment the house felt smaller, like the walls had leaned in to listen. Lydia stood near the kitchen doorway, fingers curled around her sleeve. She avoided meeting Warren's eyes, then mine, as if either glance might break something fragile inside her. She whispered that she remembered a Christmas Eve years ago, Mother clutching the phone and speaking low so none of us would hear. She can't know, not yet. Lydia said the words again, barely audible, and the memory seemed to drain the light from her face. Warren reached into his coat and slid a sealed envelope across the table. He said Mother had mailed it to him long ago, and he never opened it because he thought it was insurance paperwork. The envelope was heavy in my hand, much heavier than paper should feel. I couldn't help noticing how the edges were still crisp, untouched by time, as if Mother had prepared it for a moment exactly like this. Lydia stepped closer, her voice trembling as she asked if one of us had known all along. Warren didn't answer. He simply stared at the envelope like a man staring at a test he already knew he would fail. I felt something in my chest tighten, the kind of pressure that comes when family truths lean toward breaking instead of healing. I set the envelope down gently, but the sound still echoed. Warren said he didn't want to open it because knowing might change how we looked at each other. Lydia wrapped her arms around herself, shaking her head, saying she had been left before and didn't want to live through that feeling again. Her fear filled the room, soft but undeniable, and I had no idea how to reach her. I kept my hand on the envelope, the weight of it pulsing against my palm like a heartbeat. I knew that once it was opened, none of us would ever be able to return to the way things were. I wanted to protect all of them from whatever Mother had left behind, but I also felt the obligation she had pressed into my hands long before she died. Protect what matters from greed. Those words returned to me unbidden, sharp as the winter air outside. The living room felt colder, though I could hear the furnace running. The clock on the mantel ticked louder than it should have. I glanced toward the hallway, where the family photo sat on its usual shelf, but something about it looked off. The frame was tilted just slightly, as if someone had brushed past it too quickly, or paused to touch it when the rest of us weren't looking. Warren finally spoke, his voice low and tired. He said maybe we didn't need to open the envelope. Maybe some truths could stay where Mother left them. Lydia countered quietly, saying secrets had already torn too much from this family, and pretending would only make it worse. I watched both of them, feeling pulled in opposite directions, wanting to hold the center, but unsure if there was still a center to hold. Before I could say anything, a car door shut outside. Not a casual parking lot kind of sound, but a firm, deliberate close, the kind that carries intention. The three of us froze. Even the furnace seemed to quiet itself. Snow muffles most noises, but this one carried clean through the walls. Warren asked if I was expecting anyone. I didn't answer. I walked to the window slowly, every step feeling heavier. The driveway lights flickered from the winter wind, casting long shadows across the yard. I didn't see anyone at first, but the sense of being watched settled over me again, the same feeling that had followed me since the safe deposit box, as if the holiday night had grown an extra heartbeat. Behind me, Lydia asked if we should open the envelope. I didn't turn around. My hand rested on the cold edge of the curtain as I looked at the driveway, at the faint indentation of tires on the fresh snow that didn't belong to any of our cars. I held on to the silence for a moment longer, letting it stretch thin. Then I stepped back from the window, the envelope still waiting on the table behind me. The house felt unsteady, like a truth was pushing at its seams looking for a way in. And somewhere outside, whoever had closed that car door was still standing in the snow, still listening, still waiting. Snow drifted across the windshield in slow, tired loops as I pulled into the empty church lot. The world felt muted the way it sometimes does before a confession too heavy to hold any longer. Victor stood near the old brick wall, hands in his coat pockets, shoulders drawn in tight, as though the cold alone wasn't what made him shake. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the wind scraping through the pines. I stepped out and closed the door softly. He looked older than I remembered from the files Mother once kept, older than the man who had vanished after the charity scandal. There was a hollow look behind his eyes, the kind carried by someone who had protected the wrong secret for too long. He said my name quietly, like he wasn't sure it still belonged to me. I walked closer, and the snow crunched under my boots, a slow, deliberate sound that made him lift his head. He said Mother saved him when no one else believed him. His voice cracked, not from fear, but from something deeper, something like shame. He told me she found the error in the fund records and proved he wasn't the one siphoning money. She stood between him and the system that wanted a quick scapegoat. He said he owed her everything. I asked if he knew why she kept the ornament. He nodded once, a small gesture, almost hesitant. He reached inside his coat and pulled out a folded paper worn soft at the edges. Before giving it to me, he held it for a long moment, the way a person holds something that once felt like hope. He said there were nights when she called him asking if he was safe, asking if Evelyn was safe too. He said she knew people wanted the files she kept, but she couldn't turn them over because she discovered Warren had taken a portion of the money not out of greed, but out of panic. She wanted to protect him until she understood how deep his debts had gone. She didn't want a child in the family punished for the desperation of a parent. He finally placed the paper in my palm. A faint warmth lingered from his hand. I unfolded it under the dim glow of the parking lot light. Mother's handwriting leaned slightly to the right, the way it always did when she wrote something personal. The words were steady, but the pressure of the pen dipped deeper in the final line. "Give this back to Elliot when my true son is ready." The air tightened around me, as if the world paused to measure the distance between history and the moment I stood in. I felt a hollow thud in my chest, a mix of grief and something sharper. For the first time, I sensed how carefully she had walked the line between truth and protection. I had always trusted her judgment, but standing there, I realized how much weight she had carried alone. Victor watched me read. He said she believed I would know when the time was right, that I would understand what she couldn't say out loud without tearing the family apart. He said she chose me because I looked at people the way she did, seeing their fractures before their intentions. A gust of wind cut through us, bringing the scent of old wood from the church doors. I asked him how he found the ornament in the first place. He hesitated, glancing toward the trees at the far edge of the lot, as if expecting someone to step out. He said Evelyn tried to return something Mother left for her, something they didn't understand. They thought the ornament held the files, but they didn't know about the heat latch, a simple trick Mother learned from a friend who tinkered with handmade devices. Not high-tech, but precise enough to outsmart anyone who rushed. Victor said they tried to force it, leaving the shard I found. He said they were scared, not dangerous, and they didn't mean to frighten anyone. They thought they were finishing what Mother started. But when they realized someone else was also searching, they stepped back. He said that was the night she died, and he had been running from the guilt of it ever since. The snow thickened, layering the ground in uneven patches of white and shadow. A dull ache settled in my chest. I thought of Warren, of Lydia, of the unopened DNA envelope sitting on the dining table, like a fault line waiting to break. I thought of Mother spending her last weeks giving each of us a piece of the truth, but not the whole of it. I asked Victor what he wanted now. He didn't answer right away. He looked at the church, then at the footprints we were leaving behind us. Finally, he said he wanted to keep his promise to Mother. He said she asked him to tell me everything when the family began to fracture, when the past came back louder than the present. I didn't know if we were already there, or if the ground was still shifting beneath us. I only knew that something had to change. I felt the ornament in my coat pocket, its cold surface pressing against my ribs. I thought of how she designed it, how she hid something inside that none of us had managed to open. Not yet. Victor stepped back, his breath a thin cloud in the dark. He told me to be careful. Then he nodded once, as if acknowledging a decision already made. He walked toward his truck without looking back. As he pulled away, a different set of headlights flickered from the road, pausing longer than a passing car would. The engine idled, then eased forward slowly, almost thoughtfully, before turning out of view. I stood alone in the snow. The paper in my hand fluttered in the wind, its edges catching the light from the street lamp above. For a long moment, I simply watched the footprints we made already softening under the falling snow, fading like something half-remembered. Then I heard it. A distant sound, a car door closing somewhere beyond the trees. Not hurried, not uncertain, just final enough to remind me that whatever waited ahead was already moving toward us. I closed my hand around Mother's note and breathed in the cold air. Somewhere in that silence, I felt the faint shift of the truth pressing closer. The living room felt smaller than I remembered, as if the walls had pulled closer during the hours since I left the church lot. Warren and Lydia stood near the tree, each of them holding on to their own kind of quiet. Victor waited by the far wall, his hands clasped in front of him, his breath slow and steady, like a man who had already accepted whatever waited on the other side of the truth. I stepped closer to the tree. The lights blinked in soft waves, brushing the needles with a warm glow that reminded me of childhood mornings when Mother would hum under her breath as she adjusted the ornaments. The amber sphere rested in my palm. I felt its faint heat pulsing against my skin, as if something inside it was aware of being held again. Warren asked in a low voice if I was ready. He wasn't looking at me, only at the ornament, as though that single object carried every answer he had been running from. Lydia shifted beside him, her arms wrapped tight around her ribs, watching me the way she had watched Mother in her final month, afraid she might disappear if she blinked. Victor stepped forward. He didn't say anything at first, only angled a small lamp so the light fell across my hands. The ornament warmed slowly, the heat moving from glass to skin, and I felt the latch inside loosen with a soft click. My chest tightened at the sound. It was the same sound Mother made when she opened the clasp on her bracelet in the hospital, a motion so small I hadn't realized then it was her way of giving me permission to move on without her. The ornament opened in my hands, its halves parting like the wings of something waking. A small memory card lay in the center. For a moment I didn't touch it. I just stared, remembering the night she whispered to me that some truths could only be carried by someone who understood the cost of them. I didn't think she meant me. But standing there with my brother's breath unsteady and Lydia's fingers trembling near her cheek, I knew she did. Victor nodded once, urging me to play the recording. I inserted the card into the small player he brought. Static flickered through the room, and then Mother's voice filled the air. She sounded tired but steady, each word shaped by the years she had spent protecting us from the mistakes we never saw. She spoke of Lydia first, the child she took in when another family had turned their backs. She spoke of Warren, and how despair had led him to touch the charity funds, a mistake she had tried to shield him from, until he could make it right. Then her voice paused softer when she said my name. She said she trusted me because I looked for truth even when it hurt, and because I had never used love as a weapon. Warren's shoulders shook. He fell into the nearest chair and covered his face, not out of shame, but out of the sudden knowledge that Mother had never seen him as a burden, only as a son trying to survive his own failures. Lydia moved toward him, touching his shoulder gently. He didn't pull away. I let the recording finish. A long breath, a soft goodbye. A reminder that family survives only when someone is willing to stand in the center and hold the edges together. Then a distant crunch echoed outside the house, a sound sharp against the quiet snowfall. Victor turned his head first. I saw it in his eyes. The alarm he had armed earlier was no longer a precaution. It was a necessity. A second later, the back door forced inward with a crack that echoed through the hallway. 2 men stepped inside their boots, carrying wet snow across the hardwood. They didn't shout. Their silence was worse. They moved with purpose toward the tree, toward the open ornament in my hands. Warren rose so fast his chair tipped over. He didn't hesitate. He stepped in front of Lydia, blocking her with his full height. Victor positioned himself beside him, his stance firm, his eyes sharp with a resolve I understood only now. He wasn't here to run. He was here to finish what he owed Mother. One of the intruders took a step forward. Victor tapped something on his phone without looking. A piercing alarm erupted through the house, then out into the neighborhood. Porch lights lit up on both sides of the street. The intruders froze for a heartbeat, then bolted back through the door, their shadows scattering across the snowy yard. The house settled again, but not the same way. A quietness layered itself over us, one born of fear and relief, and something heavier, something like acceptance. I closed the ornament gently and held it to my chest, feeling the warmth still alive inside it. I understood then that the truth was never hidden in the basement, or the files, or the safe deposit box. It had always been buried in us, waiting for a night like this to come to the surface. Warren lifted his head, tears drying on his cheeks. Lydia leaned into him. Victor watched the door ready in case the world tried to break us again. I looked down at the ornament and let the breath I had been holding finally slip free. The room glowed with the soft hum of the Christmas lights, and for the first time in years, I felt something like the home we had lost, trying to find its way back. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The truth was already settling into the room, quiet and steady, waiting for what came next. Snow had begun to thicken by the time I pushed open the church hall door. The wind carried that low winter howl that always reminded me of Mother walking home from late shifts at the bank, coat pulled tight, eyes steady, even when life wasn't. Inside, the lights were cold and white, the kind that made every shadow longer and every face a little harsher. People from the neighborhood were already gathered, talking quietly among themselves. This was the annual charity review meeting, something the community center held every holiday season since the scandal years ago. Tonight, it felt like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Warren moved beside me with a stiffness I'd only seen once before, the day he learned his wife had filed for separation. Lydia walked with her arms close to her ribs, as though bracing for a blow she had rehearsed since childhood. Victor stood near the folding chairs, shoulders rounded, eyes carrying the exhaustion of a man who had protected a promise far longer than he ever planned. When he saw me, he nodded once, not out of confidence, but because turning back was no longer possible. A few people looked over as we took our seats. Most didn't know what was coming. A few, the ones who survived those old banking years, seemed to sense a storm under the quiet. The representative from the bank started speaking voice-measured sheets of paper, clicking lightly as he laid them out. He said the charity funds scandal remained one of the most unfortunate misunderstandings the town had endured. He said Mother had played a role, though mostly peripheral. Then he added something that pushed a hard pulse into my chest. He said there was no credible evidence left from that case, and whatever rumors remained should finally be let go. I stood before I knew I was standing. My chair scraped the floor with a sound that made several heads turn. My hands felt cold, but the ornament in my coat pocket felt warm, as if Mother's voice still lived inside it. I told the representative that letting go of the truth was not something Mother had ever taught us. He replied calmly, insisting that reopening old wounds served no purpose. His tone was smooth, practiced the tone of a man who believed the story had already been written. Before I could answer, Victor stepped forward. The tension in his jaw was unmistakable. He said Mother had protected him years ago, not because he was innocent of everything, but because he had stumbled and she had seen a man who wanted to stand back up. He held his worn cap between his hands, twisting the brim like he needed the feel of something solid. He said she had entrusted him with a box of documents and asked him to guard them until the right moment. And tonight, he said, felt like that moment. The room quieted. Even the old heater in the corner seemed to hesitate. I reached into my coat and brought out the ornament. For a second, no one made a sound. It hung in the air like a small sun, its amber glass catching every light in the hall. I could feel years pressing against my palm, years Mother carried alone. When I handed it to Victor, his fingers trembled. He angled it toward the heat of the overhead lamp, the same way he had shown me outside the church 2 nights earlier. A soft click answered him. The ornament opened like a breath, finally released. Inside was the memory card Mother had hidden. The way the room shifted told me the moment had arrived, the moment she had prepared for, even as her body failed. A community volunteer rushed to connect the card to the hall's projector, and when the first soft static filled the speakers, I felt my legs weaken. The sound wasn't just noise. It was her. Her voice came through with a steady fragility, the kind that made hearts rise and fall in the same instant. She said she had spent her life fixing mistakes that weren't always hers. She said she had rescued a child once because no one else would, and she raised Lydia as her own because blood mattered less than love. She said Warren had made a terrible choice, but had made it out of fear of losing everything, not greed. And she said she entrusted the truth to me because she knew I would not use it to punish, only to protect. Warren leaned forward, face buried in his hands. When her voice spoke, his name, something inside him broke open. Not shame. Grief. Relief. A son hearing after all these years that his mother had never turned away from him. The representative stepped toward the table, insisting the recording was likely outdated or incomplete. Before he could finish, the side door swung open. Evelyn Hale stepped inside her gray coat, still damp with melting snow. Her voice cut through the room with a calm resolve when she said she had come to tell what she should have told years ago. She explained she had been working the night Mother died. She said Mother was terrified someone from the bank was coming for the files, not because of what they proved, but because of what they disproved. She said Mother wanted everything out in the open, but only when it would not destroy the family she loved. The representative's face sharpened with unease. Papers in his hand trembled slightly. He said none of this changed the bank's position. That was when Victor stepped in front of him, not with violence, but with the presence of a man who finally refused to shrink. He said the bank's position did not matter anymore. The truth was spoken. The community had heard it. Before anyone could respond, a loud crash sounded from the back of the hall. The emergency exit door slammed against the wall. 2 men stood there. Faces hidden by winter caps, eyes fixed on the projector, where Mother's file log still glowed. The room froze. Chairs scraped. A few people gasped. One of the men stepped forward, as if reaching for the equipment. Without thinking, Warren moved. His body shielded Lydia in one swift, instinctive motion. The sound of his boots on the floor echoed through the hall. Victor followed him, shoulders squared, no hesitation left in him. Muksu dungde bauve nyungui fiasao. Motvai ngui dan ong trong kong dong tien len doi hin lon zun. The intruders hesitated. Someone near the entrance hit the security alarm. A piercing wail filled the hall, bouncing off the walls like a warning shot from the past. The 2 men stepped back, then bolted out into the snow, leaving only cold air and a trembling exit door behind. Silence fell thick and heavy. Warren's breathing steadied. Lydia's hands held his sleeve. Victor leaned against a chair, catching the weight of the moment in his chest. I stood there with the ornament half open in my hand. Its pieces felt lighter now, as if a burden had lifted not just from Mother's secrets, but from all of us. Yet I knew the truth had not finished with us. One more step waited deeper and quieter than anything that had come before. When the hall finally fell still, I closed the ornament with a soft click. The sound echoed more loudly than I expected, as if it carried the heartbeat of everything Mother had left unfinished. I looked at Warren, then Lydia, then the fading glow of the projector. We were not done. Not yet. The house felt different that morning. Not quieter, not safer, just different, as if the walls themselves were breathing out the tension they had been forced to hold. I stepped into the living room, while the first line of winter sunlight crept across the carpet. The tree stood there, patient through every storm we had dragged into this place. I lifted the ornament and hung it back where Mother always kept it slightly left of center, close to the branch that dipped under its weight. Its amber surface caught the light and warmed the air around it. In the kitchen, I found Warren sitting with Lydia. A pot of coffee steamed between them. No one spoke at first, and silence finally felt like something gentle instead of something waiting to break. Lydia looked older than she had days ago, but steadier too, as if the truth had pulled her apart, only to stitch her back together with something stronger. When Warren met her eyes, his shoulders lowered, and he placed his hand near hers, not touching, just close enough. He told her he was sorry, the words pushed out in a low breath. She nodded, eyes soft, and whispered something I could not hear. It did not matter. Their voices matched for the first time in years. That was enough. I walked to the counter where Mother used to set out breakfast on Christmas mornings. There was a faint mark on the wood from the years she placed her mug there, always filled with the same cinnamon coffee. My hand rested on that spot, and for a moment memory felt warm instead of heavy. I heard her laugh in the back of my mind, the way she used to tease me for oversleeping. A small thing, but it stayed with me far longer than I ever expected. Ben appeared in the doorway, still in his socks, hair sticking up like he had rushed from sleep. He looked at all of us with a slight frown, as if searching for danger that was no longer here. Lydia opened her arms, and he stepped into them without hesitation. When he glanced at me over her shoulder, his eyes held trust, a quiet kind that came from something deeper than words. I nodded to him, a simple gesture, but it felt like laying down a stone in a path we had been trying to rebuild for years. Later that morning, I drove to the small regional office where investigators were waiting. Snow drifted across the windshield, soft and harmless now. When I handed over the memory card, the officer nodded and told me they would take it from here. His voice was matter-of-fact, but his eyes carried the weight of someone who understood what families go through when truth finally finds its way out. I thanked him and stepped back into the cold air, feeling lighter than I had in days. Returning to the house, I found Warren sweeping the porch while Lydia folded blankets in the living room. Nothing dramatic, nothing grand, just small motions of people trying to breathe again. I placed my coat on the hook by the door, the one Mother always saved for me. The wood creaked softly under the weight, almost like acknowledgement. Inside, the ornament glowed faintly. Its light reflected off a framed photo on the shelf, the three of us, as kids standing beside Mother in front of a snowman that had already begun to lean. I lifted the frame and wiped the dust from its corner. When I set it back, something about the room felt aligned, like a chair pushed in after years of being left out. The afternoon slipped quietly into evening. A few lights blinked on along the street, and the sound of someone shoveling drifted from a driveway nearby. In the kitchen, Lydia warmed cocoa on the stove. Warren handed me a cup, and we sat at the table without speaking. The warmth from the mug seeped slowly into my hands, steady and grounding. I looked toward the hallway that led to Mother's old room. For the first time, the door cracked open on its own as the heater clicked on, releasing a soft current of air. That small movement felt like a blessing, the house shifting into a new season with us. None of us tried to make sense of everything at once. We simply allowed the stillness to settle. Grief and truth and forgiveness, all of them finally finding a place to rest. As the lights on the tree flickered softly, the ornament swayed just enough for the amber to catch the room again. I rose from the table and stood before it, close enough to see my reflection blur in its surface. Mother had left many things behind, but this light was the last piece she meant for us to find together. I whispered barely above a breath that we had found it, and we had found each other too. The room held the words quietly, like the walls understood what it had taken to say them. When I stepped back, the house no longer felt different. It felt whole.